This isn't just a story, it's a cry from the soul of nature. They said Ellie wouldn't make it, that she was too far gone, too wild, too broken. But fate doesn't always listen to statistics. Sometimes it answers with silence. And Snow, it had been 9 long days. 9 nights since the forest swallowed her whole. Since the last trace of her vanished into that white, breathless silence. Ellie had disappeared as if she had been a ghost all along, a fleeting spirit made of fur and frost. The cold that night had been brutal, a biting wind that didn't whisper but screamed, as if the forest itself was calling her home. Mark stood trembling at the edge of that ancient tree line, flashlight flickering like a fading hope. His voice cracked as he called her name, each syllable swallowed by the wind. On the porch, Bailey, their old golden retriever, hadn't moved in days. She lay stiff as stone, eyes fixed on the woods, ears twitching toward the nothingness. Inside, Jenna couldn't stop folding the same blanket over and over, her hands clinging to the one thing she could control. Grief had a smell. It lingered like damp firewood, stale coffee, and unshed tears. Ellie wasn't just some creature they'd rescued. She had become the soul of the house. A 6-month-old bobcat cub once pulled from a snow-buried den. Breath shallow, body limp, ribs poking through her spotted coat, Ellie had been a flicker of life wrapped in a crumpled jacket. Yet even then, she had looked up at them. And something ancient passed between her and the humans. A surrender, a question. A choice, for even the wildest heart may choose love over fear when mercy cradles it in the dark. That first night, Jenna placed Ellie in a wicker basket by the fire, wrapping her in towel after towel, whispering lullabies without words, just soft murmurs meant to tether her soul to the world of the living. Mark stayed up all night, eyes never leaving the tiny rise and fall of her side, fingers brushing her fur every hour to make sure she hadn't slipped away. She was so still, like snow itself had shaped her. And then, in the pale gray of morning, Ellie opened her eyes. Not wide, not strong, but open, and staring right at her was Bailey, the golden retriever, paws tucked beneath her, watching in silence. Ellie blinked, once, then again. That single moment, barely a breath long, was the start of something sacred. Over the coming days, they fed her drops of warm goat milk through a syringe, wrapped her in heat, bathed her in silence and prayer. She didn't hiss, she didn't try to run. Ellie wasn't tame, but she also wasn't afraid. Bailey began to follow Jenna to every feeding. She would lie nearby, tail sweeping softly against the floor, her presence calm, patient. Maternal. Sometimes Ellie would lift her weary head just to check, was Bailey still there? And every time she was. A silent sentinel, her golden fur like sunlight near Ellie's shadowed soul. There's a bond deeper than blood, forged not by origin but by grace. In the second week, something shifted. Ellie no longer just tolerated Bailey, she sought her. One morning, Jenna walked into the room and froze. Ellie was curled tightly against Bailey's belly, both breathing in perfect unison. Bailey opened one eye, looked at Jenna, then gently rested her chin on Ellie's back as if to say, "She's mine now." From that moment, their bond became uncheckable. Bailey was no longer just a companion. She became a guardian, a teacher. Ellie followed her through the house, tiny paws stepping in the prints Bailey left behind. She mimicked the dog's movements, stalking shadows, crouching low, pouncing with delight. But there was no wildness in it. It was play. Ellie watched Bailey bark at squirrels, chase butterflies, and roll in the grass, and she mirrored it all. She refused food unless Bailey was nearby, wouldn't rest until Bailey lay down first. And the night a thunderstorm shook the windows, Ellie didn't flee. She climbed onto Bailey's back and buried her face in golden fur, trembling, but safe. Jenna stood in the doorway, tears streaming silently, watching the wild become soft, and the soft become strong. Sometimes the fiercest souls are the ones who choose to love despite the scars they carry. Spring breathed life into the earth, and Ellie began to change. Her coat thickened, her gait grew graceful, and her eyes, those wild amber eyes, deepened with ancient knowing. But instinct never sleeps. Jenna noticed Ellie pausing at the edge of the yard more often, eyes fixed on the forest beyond the fence. She began climbing trees, perching high, her ears twitching at distant sounds. Still, every evening she returned, sliding against Bailey's side like a tide drawn back to its shore. Then came the moment. Mark accidentally left the gate open. Too long, Ellie didn't bolt. She simply walked to the hill behind the house and sat, staring, waiting. Bailey joined her, pressing her nose to Ellie's shoulder like she understood. Ellie didn't run, but in that stillness was a question. Was she still theirs, or was the wild calling her back? Even the wilderness may pause at the edge of love before returning to its roots. Days later, while on a trail behind the house, Bailey froze. Ellie, ahead by a few feet, dropped low, tense. A red fox darted from the underbrush. Without hesitation, Ellie leapt, not to chase, but to block. She placed herself between Bailey and the threat, fur bristling, eyes narrowed. It was the first time instinct spoke not to hunt, but to protect. Jenna stood frozen, witnessing something unspeakable. Ellie had become something more than rescued. She had become devoted. The next days overflowed with quiet confirmations. Ellie anticipated Bailey's routines, waited by the door for walks, sat beside her during meals, even when her own was finished. She even developed a strange rasping sound, not a growl, not a hiss, but something between, an echo of a bark, as if she was trying to speak in Bailey's tongue. They shared toys. Ellie hid them. Bailey found them. They never fought, only followed, only trusted. They were no longer predator and pet. They were soul-bound. When two hearts speak in kindness, even nature must pause and listen. One afternoon, Jenna walked into the sunroom and stopped cold. Bailey lay across Ellie's back, and Ellie's paw was resting gently on Bailey's shoulder. The golden and the wild, the domestic and the untamed. And in that moment, they were one different in every way, yet moving through the world like two halves of a forgotten hymn. When strangers visited, Ellie would vanish under the couch, but the moment Bailey wagged her tail or gave a soft bark, Ellie would reappear, always beside her. Guests would smile and whisper, "She thinks she's a dog," but Jenna knew the truth. Ellie wasn't confused. She had simply chosen not to be a dog, but to be loved. Love, when chosen freely by the wild, becomes the most powerful miracle of all. An animal disappeared into the wild, but when she returned, the forest came with her. Some stories never end where you expect them to. One of the neighbors whispered once, "She thinks she's a dog." But the truth, the raw, aching truth, was far more profound. Ellie wasn't pretending. She wasn't lost in some fantasy of being something she wasn't. She was becoming who she was meant to be, not a dog, not a wild thing, but something in between. Something whole. With Bailey beside her, Ellie had carved a new identity, not defined by instinct or species, but by the soft and fierce kind of love that only arises between two souls who choose each other. And then came the moment when the wild whispered back. It was a late afternoon in early May, and the earth had begun its slow, sacred bloom. The air had thickened with warmth, carrying the buzz of life and renewal. The snow had vanished, replaced by fields humming with green, and the forest beyond pulsed with the rhythm of spring. Ellie had grown into her power, taller now, sleek and sure-footed, her wildness more visible, but her spirit still tethered to Bailey. That day, Jenna took them both into the field behind the house. Bailey trotted ahead with carefree joy, tongue lolling, tail swaying like sunshine. Ellie stayed close, scanning the tree line as she always did, cautious, aware, present. But then something changed, a flash, a crack, stillness. When the wild within meets the wild beyond, something ancient awakens, not to break you, but to reveal you. Bailey didn't notice. She was chasing the invisible path of a rabbit, but Ellie froze. Every line of her body taut, alert. Her head lowered. Jenna followed her gaze, and then she saw it. Just beyond the birch trees at the field's edge, a shadow moved. Not like the others, not wind, not squirrel. A bobcat, male, wild, larger than Ellie, more primal, unafraid he was watching. Not Threatening, watching. Ellie didn't hiss, didn't crouch. But her ears went back, her tail flicked once. A shift, not in her stance, but in her soul. And then Bailey barked, loud, sudden, protective. The moment shattered. The male vanished. Into the brush, Ellie didn't follow. She turned, heart pounding, and ran not toward the wild, but straight to Bailey. She pressed herself against her, body trembling, breath shallow, eyes wide with something Jenna had never seen before. Recognition. Ellie had seen something in that bobcat, perhaps a reflection of what she was supposed to be. But she chose. Again, chose Bailey, chose home. Even when the blood calls to the wild, love may answer louder. That night, Ellie didn't rest. She paced from window to door, door to window. Her eyes never left the forest. Something had been stirred. Something that couldn't be unseen. Bailey watched her from the rug, alert but still, knowing better than to follow. By morning, the shift was impossible to ignore. Ellie stopped eating. She wouldn't respond to touch. Wouldn't play. She hovered by the door, staring out as if the trees were speaking a language only she could hear. Sometimes she growled, low and unfamiliar, at sounds invisible to everyone else. Jenna and Mark tried everything. Soft food, hand-fed meals. Bailey's nudges. Nothing broke through. Ellie wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. She was deciding. Not with her head, but with something deeper. The soul makes choices even logic can't explain. For 3 days she remained like that, present but elsewhere. Her body in the house, her spirit halfway across the snow-laced mountains of memory. She slept on the windowsill now, tail twitching, ears half-tuned to the dark, and then, on the 4th morning, she was gone. No noise, no warning. No broken window, no open door. The fence stood tall and locked. Yet Ellie had vanished. Bailey was the first to know. She rose before the sun, trotted to the window, and barked once. Not frantic, but final. Jenna found the gate scratched. Just a few faint paw prints pressed into the dew-soft earth, leading into the trees. And then nothing. Ellie had left. But this time it felt different. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't curiosity. It was goodbye. The house didn't just fall quiet. It hollowed, like something sacred had been taken. From its walls, Bailey stopped barking at the mail truck, stopped waiting at the door. She lay near the back window for hours, unmoving, ears perked, body still, listening for a sound that never came. When a bond breaks, it leaves behind an echo, not of pain, but of what once was holy. Jenna called her name every morning at the edge of the woods. Mark installed a motion sensor camera, reviewed hours of footage each night, but the forest offered no clues, no footprints, no sightings, no rustling in the leaves. It was like Ellie had been absorbed, swallowed by something bigger, older, and deeper than human understanding. By the 6th day, Jenna stopped calling. Her voice couldn't hold itself together anymore. Bailey wouldn't eat, not even her favorite treats, not even from Mark's hand. One night she whimpered in her sleep, her paws twitching, as if chasing something that only existed in dreams. Jenna found her curled in the sunroom one morning, lying on the same blanket Ellie used to rest on. She had dragged one of Ellie's old toys, a tattered cloth mouse, into the corner and placed it beside her. And in that moment, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't just the loss of a pet. It was the loss of a promise, a sacred thing, a miracle undone. Some bonds are so real, even silence can't erase them. Then came the 9th night. Just past midnight, the world held its breath. Bailey stirred, lifted her head. She didn't bark, didn't growl, she knew. Jenna, asleep on the couch, opened her eyes to see Bailey staring, still and solemn. At the back door, then came the sound. Barely more than a whisper, a soft shuffle, something brushing against the wood. Jenna rose, heart crashing in her chest, and opened the door. The cold met her first, then the darkness, and then movement. Ellie stepped forward into the porch light, thin, mud-matted, her ear torn. A fresh cut across her nose, her breaths came in short gasps. But her eyes were steady. She didn't move toward Jenna, she looked past her. Bailey barked once. then pushed forward, nose burying in Ellie's fur. Ellie didn't flinch. She leaned in, weak but whole, present. And then two shadows appeared behind her. Tiny, trembling, clinging, two bobcat kittens, barely 6 weeks old, one limping, one gripping Ellie's hind leg like a lifeline. Jenna couldn't breathe. Her hand flew to her mouth. Ellie turned slightly, just enough to check they were still there, then looked back at Bailey. No words were spoken, none were needed. Ellie hadn't just survived. She had become a mother. She had chosen the wild, but she had brought back its heart. In the end, love doesn't divide us by species or blood, it reveals us, and sometimes the wild returns. Not to be tamed, but to be known. She had returned, but not as she left. And she didn't come back alone. The sun had just begun to rise when Ellie re-entered their lives, battered, breathless, but not broken. And trailing behind her were two fragile sparks of life, her cubs. The days that followed became something Jenna and Mark could only describe as sacred, not in any traditional sense, but in the quiet, unexplainable way that ordinary life suddenly tilts toward the miraculous. The sunroom, once just a space for plants and soft light, became a sanctuary. Jenna laid out blankets, old towels, soft bedding in every corner. She placed bowls of warm milk, whispered lullabies meant for creatures who did not understand words but felt their intention. The two kittens, whom they named Scout and Luna, were small, wild-eyed, all ribs and tremble. At first, they moved like shadows, startled by every creak of the house, every distant bark, but Ellie stayed close, her presence their only safety. They clung to her, hiding behind her tail, burying themselves into the crook of her legs when fear took over. Ellie never left them, not even for a moment, and neither did Bailey. The golden retriever, now aged by worry and softened by love, lay beside the little family as if it were her own. She nudged the kittens awake in the morning with a gentle nose, licked their heads when they whimpered, curled her warm body around theirs when the thunder rolled through the valley. There are families we are born into, and those we build, with our hearts, paw by paw, breath by breath. Ellie had changed. Not just physically, though the wounds on her body told their own story. Her torn ear, misshapen, rugged, would never return to its full form. But it stood now like a badge of something greater, the danger she had faced, yes, but also the unwavering love that brought her back. Her coat had dulled slightly, dusted with mud and effort, but her eyes were still gold fire. And in them, Jenna saw something deeper than survival. She saw purpose. Ellie hadn't just returned because she missed her family. She returned because she had become one herself. The wild hadn't stolen her, it had gifted her. And she, against everything written in her blood, had chosen to bring that gift home. She hadn't disappeared. She had gone to become something. A protector, a mother, a living miracle stitched from wilderness and love. Love that's chosen, despite risk, despite instinct, is the truest kind. Bailey didn't hesitate. She accepted Scout and Luna without pause. Not as guests, not as visitors, but as her own. She sniffed them gently when they cried. She curled around them as if her body could keep them from every shadow that might fall across the sunroom. Jenna caught herself crying more than once at the sight. The golden retriever curled with the two tiny bobcats nestled between her paws, Ellie watching quietly from the edge like a sentinel of old myths. The house had become something else entirely. Not just a shelter, not even just a home, but a place where the impossible had laid down roots. The once feral bobcat who had nearly died in a snowstorm had now returned from the woods with life tucked into her side, and she had returned here. To Bailey, to Jenna, to love. Every night, the porch glows in amber light as Jenna watches them, Bailey and Ellie stretched side by side in the grass, and the kittens tumbling between them like children who have never known fear. Scout tries to pounce on Bailey's wagging tail. Luna clings to Ellie's back, mewing for attention. And between them, species who were never meant to live as one, there exists no division, no danger, only trust. Nature may write the rules, but love writes the exceptions. Jenna often stands barefoot on that porch, a mug of tea in her hand, heart swelling beyond what words can carry. This bond, this unspoken peace, is what the world forgets when it moves too fast. The truth is simple. Ellie could have stayed gone, could have raised her kittens in silence, in wildness, away from fences and firelight, but she came back. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because this is where her soul had bloomed. And Bailey, who had once waited, days in unmoving sorrow, now rests each night with her chin atop a kitten's back, ears relaxed, heart whole again. Family isn't who you're born to, it's who stays. Who protects, who returns. So, if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that love is real, that hope can be found in paw prints, that sometimes wildness doesn't divide us but unites us. Don't let it fade. Subscribe, share, because at Jungle Diaries we bring you real stories of survival, of animal rescue, of miracles made of fur and trust and second chances, stories of the wild choosing love. Again and again, there's more hope out there. You just have to know where to look.